Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to the Pranzata Podcast. This is your host, Andrea Pranzatelli. This is episode number 104 on the Pranzata Podcast series on YouTube. Before we get into it, if you are new to this channel, please don't forget to hit subscribe if you like what you hear today. It is my mission to grow this channel this year, and your support is incredibly helpful. Also, I like to sometimes discuss philosophical ideas or sometimes controversial ideas. So I'm always interested in hearing what the listeners have to say in response to some of these topics. So feel free to leave your comments below. It is my vision for this podcast for it to become a community podcast. So it's not just important what I have to say. I also want to hear what you have to say. All right, so let's get right into it. So for the listeners who have been loyal to this podcast, if you're wondering why I didn't post on here consistently the past week and a half, it's because I just recently went through a move. I just moved from South Jersey to Philadelphia. Before, I had been commuting from South Jersey into Philadelphia to partake in music events and comedy events and whatnot. And then recently I decided to make the switch to move directly into Philadelphia. So that has been very exciting. However, because of that, I have not been able to keep up with my normal content schedule because things were literally pulled apart in boxes. So it was impossible to keep up with it. So this podcast, I apologize, is not going to be a video podcast. It's going to be solely an audio podcast because I want to get back on schedule and I need something out literally by today. So when this posts, it's going to be like authentic to the actual day I'm speaking. I'm speaking in the morning and I'm going to be posting this by the evening. Okay. So for this week's episode, I wanted to take questions and answers. So I put something on my Instagram story asking for questions from the listeners. So I picked about 6 questions. I apologize if your question didn't get picked. I tend to rant with these questions and I can talk a long time. So realistically, 6 is probably all I can handle. So if I didn't get yours this time, I'll try to get it the next time. But here we go. First question. James Mac Comedy, who happens to be a loyal listener to this podcast and who was a guest on this podcast several times. He was an excellent guest. His question to me is, what is your writing process? I think this is a great question. First, I want to say for those listening who ask this question seeking to find their own writing process, my advice to you would be that there is no one-size-fits-all writing process. Everybody's writing process is so unique. So I'll tell you what mine is, but at the end of the day, you just need to find your own writing process. But if you're just curious to hear what mine is, I will gladly share that with you. So I would say my process is similar but different depending on what I'm writing. So I write music, I write my own original songs, and I also write stand-up comedy. So I'll break down what I do for each. For stand-up comedy, I feel like it's a pretty simple process for me. I don't sit down and think about things that are funny. I just, as my day is going on, if funny things pop into my head, and they can pop in any time of the day, they normally pop in when I'm relaxed, when I'm doing dishes, when I'm taking a shower, sometimes when I'm just about to fall asleep or when I just wake up. They pop in my head any time of day. As soon as I have a funny thing pop in my head that made me chuckle to myself, or if I've noticed it made a friend chuckle, I will just immediately grab my phone, and I have on my iPhone, in the iPhone notes section, it just says comedy. That's the title. And then I just go there and I add it on. Sometimes my friends will even partake in this because they know I do this. And they'll be like, hey, that was funny what you said. Write it in your notes. So that's my first step. I don't really consciously think of funny things. When funny things happen, I just take note of them. Then later, I go back to those notes and I pick, if I know I'm going to do an open mic that week, I'll pick maybe 5, because usually at open mics, you get a 5-minute set. And I've personally noticed that 5 minutes usually for me, and this is individual for every single person who does stand-up comedy, depends how long your jokes are. personally for me, I notice 5 minutes is about 5 topics on there. So I take about 1 minute per joke, unless it's a one-liner. But typically I would choose 5 to 8 topics on there, somewhere around there. So I'll pick the things that I think have potential, and then I will sit and break them down and try to come up with a punchline, try to rearrange it, try to think of a funny way to say it, try to rearrange the words. So, you know, the initial creative spark is just natural. It just comes to me naturally. The actual work is something I do afterwards. I never do it the other way. I never sit and think of something funny and then hope something creative comes up. That's not true for everybody. Some people would shame me for that. They'd be like, shame on you. You should sit down and write even if you don't have that creative spark. But I just don't do it that way. I just kind of go through my notes and then I sit down and break it apart analytically. Music, I would say, is pretty much a similar process. I usually do best writing music when I'm jamming with somebody. For those of you know, when I was living in South Jersey, I was living with my now ex-boyfriend. Long story short, I'm not going to get into that. We broke up, but it was a very civil breakup. We still play in the band together. We're still great friends. And quite honestly, I feel like our musical relationship, it was the best part of our relationship. So I'm glad that we both were mature about this and were able to maintain a beautiful musical relationship post our breaking up. But anyways, that's just like a side note. I just kind of wanted to fill in the listeners about that, because some people have been reaching out to me and they're like, oh, are you and your boyfriend enjoying Philadelphia? And then I have to like get into the story. So, you know, hopefully that takes care of that. I don't have to explain it to any more people. But anyways, he and I would get together and we would just jam. We would just freely jam. He would play drums. I would play keys. Again, it's very similar to me as comedy. I wouldn't intellectually come up with an idea. We would just kind of like bounce creativity off of each other. First, I'll end up finding chords on the piano that sound cool to me. And it's not complicated. I'm not hitting like tons of different chords. Usually it's like a 2-chord progression. Like I'll find 2 chords that sound cool. And then once I get locked into something that sounds good to me, then I'll start just mumbling random lyrics. Usually I'll just mumble a melody that sounds good to me and the words won't make any sense at all. To be funny, like to be silly about it, I mean, it's almost embarrassing, but just so you get the idea, I have a song in my original band, which is called Arcane Jane, by the way. You can find us on Instagram, Arcane Jane Philly. But there's a song called Step on My Soul. And the first time I was singing that, jamming out with, you know, my ex-boyfriend, the drummer, Tristan, I was just like randomly chanting, lick my balls, lick on my balls. So then like the melody was really cool, but those were the first words that came to my head. And then again, kind of like the comedy thing, you get this creative spark and then you go back and then you analyze it and pick it apart. So then lick on my balls became step on my soul. I'd like totally changed the lyrics for obvious reasons. I mean, I guess we could have kept it that way and been like a silly comedy band, but no, that wasn't really what we were going for. So that's usually my music writing process. And I will admit I'm not great at writing lyrics. So typically what I'll do is writing music is very much a community effort for me. Again, that's why my ex Tristan and I, the drummer, we would work so well together because whatever I was lacking, he had, and vice versa. So I would just feel so comfortable with the chord progression and the melody, and he would feel so comfortable with the rhythm. Obviously he's a drummer, and then the lyrics. So he would come back and sit with me and say, hey, why don't we put these words with this melody? That would sound cool. Sometimes I would even tell him like, I know what this song is about. I just don't know what words to put it. But like, I know this song is about this ex-boyfriend I had, and this is the story about the situation. So I would even give him some like groundwork to work with. Like, I know this is what this is about. And then he would write some lyrics, and then I would go back in and edit the lyrics that I didn't like. So that's how we did the songwriting. It was very much a community-based effort. And actually, when I go back to the comedy writing, when I really think about it, comedy writing is also a community-based effort because really the community is the audience, like you write comedy by yourself, but when the comedian goes to an open mic and interacts with the audience, they're really taking part of the writing process because they're getting feedback from the audience, and then a good comedian will go back home and write in their notebook like what worked, what didn't work, and try to edit it. So it's like kind of fascinating when you think about it, is that writing seems to go so much better when it's a community-based effort. You know what I mean? But yeah, long story short, to move on to the next question, like I said in the beginning, that doesn't mean my process is your process, because I know some people who do it the polar opposite way. I know some comedians who literally just go on stage and they just improvise right then and there. I know some musicians who don't jam first, that they have a song that comes into their head and they have all the details clearly coming into their head, So, writing is such an individualized process. The one thing I will say before I move on to the next question, sorry, I told you I could rant. I might not even get through all 6 questions, is that there is a lot of theories out there that creativity isn't really yours. It's something out there in the ethos. I've heard a lot of people refer to it. They made the analogy of a radio station, that you tune like the old school radios that would have that fuzz, that there's information out there, but your body needs to be in tune to find it. And I think I believe this, because I think that's why so many people end up having similar creative ideas, because there is such thing as parallel thinking, which you often see in stand-up comedy. Especially you'll have comedians like accusing each other of stealing each other's jokes, which does sometimes happen. But there's also genuine instances, and I've had it with myself. I've had instances where I thought of a joke and someone else got to it before me, and I was like, God damn it, I can't use that joke now, or at least not in that way. So I do think that that's an interesting theory, that this information is just out there for ours to be had, and it's up to us to tune into it. And some people tune into it. And I think I'm definitely one of those people when it comes to especially the musical stuff, because I feel like, well, both really. I feel like I tune into the information that's already out there, which I like. I like that, because then you sort of remain humble in the creative process that way, because you realize you're not really the one writing it. It's just there for you to have, if that makes any sense. I mean, I can't prove this is true, but I do have some beliefs like that, because otherwise, where the hell is these sparks of creativity coming from? I think as a human being, it's my job to take care of my body and my health, so I could be available for the information. But besides that, like, it's totally out of my control, Anyways, moving on to the next question. TLH Drums, went to college with him. He's a musician, a fantastic drummer. He asked me a question. He said, what's your take on abnormal body types performing in a normal body type industry? I'll just repeat the question for those who didn't catch that. What's your take on abnormal body types performing in a normal body type industry? So at first, I thought the question was a little bit broad, so I didn't understand it. I had to reach out to him to get further information. My first reaction to it before getting that information would be, well, I guess it depends on the industry you're talking about. So, for example, there are some clear industries that work well with one specific body type. The first obvious one that comes to my mind is horse jockeys. And for those who don't know what a horse jockey is, it's a human performing in horse races. It's the person who rides the horse in the horse race. Obviously, for obvious reasons, you're going to want a more slender person as a horse jockey. I've been to horse races before, and I don't think I've ever seen, there is a very typical body type in horse races. That's the first example that I could think of, and I'm sure there's other examples of different industries where different body types seem to work well with that specific industry. So that would be my first response is, well, I can't really answer your question because it all depends on the industry you're talking about. So then I reached out to him and I was like, can you be more specific? Modeling? Are you talking about models? Like what? And then he shared his information that he's talking about something he's personally experienced. He said that he works in marching percussion, and his experience, and so has some of his colleagues, have complained that the harnesses that are used to hold the drums are not built for different body types. They're really built for a standard, like tall and thin gentleman, according to him. And he said that people who are a little bigger, a little heavy set, or females who have curves tend to feel very uncomfortable in the harnesses. So my answer to that would be, as far as I'm concerned, I think the only requirement for playing drums is being a good drummer. So this would be, in my opinion, this would be a completely different case than something like the horse jockey. You know, a musician's job is to play music well. So I don't think there should be any discrimination against body types in the field of musicianship. With that being said, I think your specific case, I would really need to know more information. For example, what you're talking about, the harnesses only being available to a specific slender, tall body type. Is that across the board completely for all people working in marching band, or is it specifically your team? I would say if it's specifically your team, you might just have a very cheap coach. I don't know, but I'm saying I don't, you know, but I'm saying to your specific case, you may just have a really cheap coach who doesn't want to invest in harnesses that are catered to different body types. I don't know. I would say if that's the case, it might just be your team. But if this is like across the board internationally, people are complaining about this, then I would say, yeah, that's a problem. Because as far as I know, the only qualifications for being a musician is to be a good musician. And of course, and especially if you're talking about like different body types, you know, it's not just overweight people, it's also females and stuff like that. Then my answer to that would be, of course, they should build harnesses that are built for different sizes and for male and female. That's crazy that they don't. So I'm really sorry if that's something you're going through, because that sounds really, I don't like that. I think that's incredibly difficult. The only thing I will say about this is I do think there is a limit when it comes to this type of thing. So for example, I've heard stories about airplanes and extremely obese people, like, and I'm talking extremely obese people had advocated for airplanes to have different size seating. I think I'm sorry if this sounds like controversial or I'm going to offend somebody by this. I think if you reach a point where your body is extremely obese and unhealthy, I don't think it's the entire world's job to cater and mold into that small population of people. I'm sorry, I don't. However, I don't think that's the case with you. I think in your case, you have a totally, in my opinion, a normal sized body. So if you can't find a harness to fit your body type, I do think that's an issue. I don't know the first thing about how to change that. I guess talking to your coach maybe, or maybe having like sign a petition with other people on the team who feel that way. If other women feel that way or other larger people feel that way, maybe talk about getting some funding for the team from your coach. But again, I would need to know more specifics. Like, is this something specific to your team, or is this an international issue that people have been complaining about for a while now? I do think if that's the issue, you probably do have hope for something like this to change, especially in the climate we live in today about body acceptance and whatnot. I think I do have faith that this could change. And then same thing with the genders. You know, I mean, women should be able to participate in drumline. I mean, that's crazy to me to think that they wouldn't. I would say it's probably a financial issue. It's probably people are just too cheap to invest in the harnesses. Maybe the harnesses are expensive. I don't know. But at the very least, they should make some variety of for one, male and female, and two, like small, medium, large, extra large. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think that's pretty understandable, and I don't think your complaints are totally valid in that case. And like I said, I do believe there is an exception, like where it goes over the limit. Like if someone is, morbidly obese, 300 pounds, I don't think it's somebody's responsibility to financially support that. I think that person probably should try to work on losing some weight to fit into at least an extra large. But I mean, if we're talking like the standard variation of body sizes from small to extra large, male to female, curvy to petite, there should be totally a variety in the uniforms. Drop in the comments below what you guys think about that. If you agree with me, disagree with me, curious to hear what you have to say. All right, next question. It's actually from two people. They kind of asked the same question, so I wanted to shout out both of them. The first one is from Montag Comedy, a stand-up comedian in Philadelphia, hilarious, very handsome too, hilarious and handsome. He was on the podcast. And the other one was from my personal friend, Raya, beautiful girl. She wasn't on the podcast, but she's a friend. So they both kind of asked the same question. First, John asked, talk about life in the big city. And then Raya asked, what are you most excited for in your new location? So let me repeat that. Montag Comedy asks or tells me to talk about life in the big city. And Raya asks, what are you most excited for in your new location? So first I'm going to address what I've noticed living in the city is like so far. So I actually, unfortunately, don't have much of a response to what it's like to live in the city because I've only been here for 2 weeks. So it's been a really crazy few weeks moving here. Long story short, there was an unfortunate accident, and by the way, it's not his fault, like because I know this individual listens to my podcast, so it's not like an anger thing. I'm just explaining the situation. There was an unfortunate situation where the landlord had an injury and he couldn't get the apartment ready on time. Totally not his fault, just explaining the situation. Because of that, there had been some construction going on in the apartment. So personal choice, I didn't feel too comfortable leaving the apartment or house, I should say. It's actually like a Philadelphia style house. I didn't feel too comfortable leaving the house because, construction people in my house, they seemed like trustworthy people, but you just never know. I just wanted to play it safe. I just moved here, don't really know anybody around here. So for the most part, I wanted to remain home during the construction. And then on top of that, I'm a piano teacher to support. This podcast is not yet monetized. That's a goal, which by the way, if you're listening to this is a perfect time to intervene here and say, please subscribe to the podcast. It is my mission to get this podcast monetized because I love doing this. I'm very passionate about doing this. And I would like to do this as a full-time career. I would like to get to a point where I can financially support myself from my podcast. And, I promise to you guys listening, if you subscribe and help me get to that point, I want to hire a team of people to edit these better, a team of people to help me record better videos, better camera angles, better video quality. Right now I'm doing audio, so I guess it's not, audio is audio. But for the video ones, I really want to step up my game, get better guests, everything like that. So it would really mean a lot to me if you guys could hit subscribe and help me get to my goal of monetizing this channel. I'm getting very close actually, which is incredibly exciting. So I appreciate everybody who's been listening and everybody who has put forth that effort to help me. Anyways, back to it, where I was even going with that. I'm a piano teacher to support myself financially during, this journey of podcasting and musicianship and whatnot. I had scheduled my students' big yearly piano recital the same week I moved, which I know sounds crazy. Everybody asked me why would you time it like that? Are you insane? And the reason I did that is because I wanted to do a holiday recital, and I knew if I pushed it back like an extra week, that it would be so close to Christmas that it would just stress everybody out. So I was like, you know what? I think I can handle it. So long story short, to answer your question, what is it like living in the big city? I have no idea because I haven't been in the big city. I live in a house in the big city, but I've been inside for the past 2 weeks. Thank God this week is the final week of the construction being finished. I think there's one more task left. All I will say so far is that I don't even know what to say. Like as I said, I've been inside most of the time. I think what I'll say so far is that it hasn't even registered or clicked that I live in a city. It's crazy. Like, I did run an errand for my piano recitals. I went to Staples to print out the programs for the piano recitals because my printer is broke right now. And it was crazy. Like, the Staples was in like the big center city, like portion of the city. And it was like really, it was just crazy to be like, oh, this is what a trip to Staples is going to look like for me from now on. You know what I mean? When I lived in the Jersey suburbs, I would like drive through a bunch of boring corporate kind of like traffic, but just going to Staples, there was just like a lot of excitement, a lot of city life, a lot of traffic. It was crazy and it was exciting. I like that. Not everybody likes like city life. Some people would be overwhelmed by that, but to me it was very exciting. So that's all I could say so far is like just the change of pace of running errands, looking more like a city, you know? I will say one more thing about living the city as far as danger goes. First of all, I don't mean to be nasty, but I'm going to say this because this does irritate me. A big F you to all the people who are like, you're going to get shot in the city. You're going to get killed there. Are you crazy? Why do you want to live there? That type of like fear mongering drives me crazy. I want to live in a city. I enjoy taking the risk of living in somewhere with more potential threats to trade that for the excitement and the opportunity that isn't a city. So first of all, F you to all the people who want to impose their thoughts and anxieties on me. I'm not going to absorb that. I enjoy living here. With that being said, there are some things different about living in a city that you wouldn't normally have to deal with living in the suburbs. Thankfully, I live in a safer portion of the city. I live in a quiet neighborhood, plenty of parking, really quiet at night. It's kind of amazing because literally a 5-minute drive away from me, there's like constant action, stuff going on all the time, people walking around late at night. And then like 5 minutes away where I live, it honestly doesn't feel that much different than living in the suburbs, like a busy suburbs, you know? The one thing I will say is I did notice you have to be more careful about going out at night because even though during the day it's safe here, I think past like midnight when things start to get dark, even in the safer neighborhoods, you have to kind of watch your back a little bit. The only thing I noticed sketchy that went on this week was one of my neighbors on this street had left a bunch of like, I guess, I don't know if they're moving or whatnot, but they had a bunch of stuff that they had left at the curb. Like there was like a cat tree and like different furniture and stuff like that. And then I noticed in the middle of the night, this actually happened last night. It scared the shit out of me. I heard something rustling around outside. And my first instinct was, oh, maybe that's like a stray cat because I saw a stray cat in the neighborhood. But then it got a little louder. I'm like, that doesn't sound like a cat. And I noticed at 3:00 in the morning, there was somebody like, quote unquote, dumpster diving the stuff. And I say quote unquote because it's not technically a dumpster, but you know what I mean. They were just going through the trash and they were doing it for like an hour and a half to 2 hours at 3:00 in the morning. And I felt at first I felt nervous. I'm like, what? Like, cause they were like right out, you know, this is one of my neighbors. So they were really close to me. And at first I was like, what the hell is this guy doing? Like he's looking for valuables to sell. And then in my head, I'm thinking like, after a while, I wasn't scared at all. I was like, whatever, he's just going to do his thing and leave at some point. He's obviously not trying to like break into houses. He's just like dumpster diving. But my thought process was like, if this guy's going to come out at 3:00 in the morning on his bicycle to dumpster dive for valuables for an hour and a half in the freezing cold, like, wouldn't it be easier just to get a job? like you're basic. This is a job. This is basically a job for you at this point. And maybe I'm speaking insensitively to people in this situation. Perhaps maybe he's a drug addict. Perhaps he can't keep a job. I don't know. I don't know what the exact specifics are, but I'm just like, that's a lot of effort. It's freezing out. You're sneaking around. I could tell he was trying to be quiet, but the way he was rustling around, it was so close to where I live that I could hear it. And I'm a very light and hypervigilant sleeper. So I was just like, what the hell, dude? Like, just get a job. I mean, this is a lot of fucking work. You could be sleeping right now, or if you want to work an overnight shift at 3 a.m, you could be working somewhere in a warm, heated up room. Even working for minimum wage would be better than that. But anyways, I'm probably speaking insensitively. People like that probably can't hold up a job. But anyways, that's the only like danger I've noticed is at night there's petty theft in the neighborhood. So I'm sure, there's a risk of somebody breaking into my car or whatnot. But besides that, I really like living here. It's really peaceful during the day and everything like that. Before it gets dark, I don't feel unsafe at all. It's such a close drive to the center city and the big part of the city. Amazing food. I had some food DoorDash to me this week during the construction because I didn't, the kitchen wasn't so usable during that week and I didn't want to leave the house. So I got some food DoorDash to me and I was like overwhelmed with the amount of options that I could choose from on DoorDash compared to when I lived in the suburbs. I was like, holy shit, there is any cuisine you can think of. So I'm really excited by that. And that's going to have me transition into the next question from Raya. What are you most excited about living in the big city? So one, I would say, is the food. I'm a huge foodie. I love to cook. I take pictures of food, which annoys people sometimes, but I don't care. I love it. I love food. I like the way it looks. I like the way it smells. I like the way it tastes. Like, I love food. So the fact that I saw all those options on DoorDash got me really excited. So as soon as this last task of this construction is done, I am going to go out there and get some good food and go out to eat. That is the first thing I'm really excited about. Second, I'm really excited about the social opportunities that I will build here. It was difficult to do stand-up when I was living in South Jersey because while the drive to Philly was only 25 minutes away, because of how busy I am, those 25 minutes did sometimes make me lazy, So the fact that I'm in the city now and I can drive to an open mic in 5 minutes now is going to be really exciting. The musical opportunities, I don't know, like, long story short, I mean, it's a city. There's just a world of opportunities at my fingertips now. So if I had to sum it up, the food, the people, and the career opportunities, I'm really looking forward to. And again, like I said, there are some things you got to watch your back for and be careful about living in a city. But to me, the trade-off is so worth it. And I almost feel bad, like, for the people who avoid cities, for those reasons. It's like, yeah, you got to watch your back a little bit, but there's just so much awesome stuff here that to me, it's 100% worth it to just be a little bit vigilant, to have all these opportunities at your fingertips. Moving on, I have 3 more questions. I'll try not to ramble as much so we can get through them. The next one is from Vox Music Studios, LLC. She was also on my podcast. Incredibly brilliant woman, very well studied in the field of love and relationships. So she actually asks me a question about love and relationships. And I'm not even remotely as versed as she is in this field. So I feel honored that she even trusts my opinion at all. But she asks me, what will the climate of organic socializing and dating be in 10 or 20 years? So I'm almost afraid to answer this question because I don't want to come across as a negative doomsdayer when it comes to technology in the future. But I have spoken about this a little bit on my podcast before, so I will just kind of talk about it again. I'm not very hopeful about the dating life, the socializing dating life in the future. I'm truly not. I'm not doomsday about everything technology-wise, but But I do think that we're already seeing studies about young men being single and young men being virgins well past their 20s. I think people are so integrated into technology, into socializing on technology, that the idea of actually going out and being rejected by a real woman is probably so overwhelming. I think that pornography is actually contributing to this worse. I think that pornography is taking a turn where it's actually becoming, in a way, virtual. People are having virtual relationships with sometimes not even real people. Like sometimes they're just bots. Like they're just like very realistic looking bots. And I think a lot of lonely single men are actually partaking in this because they want some type of affection. And I think this is, I don't have a ton of hope like for the youth as far as dating and socializing goes for the future. With that being said, I do have a little bit of hope left. I do think that there will be a revolt of people who want it to be old school. I think with every problem, there's always going to be a community of people who recognize the problem and want the opposite. So I will definitely be part of that community, by the way. Like I want organic, like meet people in person, have sex with real people type of dating and socializing. That's what I want for the future. But my honest prediction is that I would say the majority of the population are not going to have kids. The majority of the population are going to be virgins. The majority of the population are males specifically. The majority of the population are going to have trouble socializing in person and are going to prefer to meet friends and romantic interest online. But with that being said, there still is probably going to be a strong group of individuals who like want to keep it old school and want to keep it organic. They're going to be like the organic daters, you know? And like I said, you can count me in. I'm going to be one of those people in that movement. But I totally think that is going to be the reality. That's my prediction. I could be wrong. I mean, who knows? I mean, like, who knows if we'll even be here as a species by then? And again, I don't want to sound doomsday, but the only reason I'm saying that, I'm being dramatic, saying like things have been changing so rapidly that I have no idea. But based on what I'm seeing now and the trends I'm seeing now, and they're already being evidence about men having less and less sex and pursuing sex in real life less, that would be my honest prediction. And I hope, like, if this podcast builds, I hope I could be a source of helping people getting out and socializing in real life, because I think technology should be an aid to the human experience, not a replacement of the human experience. You know, like, I love Google. I love DoorDash. I love Google Maps. I like the fact that I don't have to think where to go. I can just hit a button. But the end goal should be for me to use that technology to go there and still be a part of an actual community of real people. You know, I really hope that there will still be a community of people who use technology as an aid and not a replacement. And this, by the way, that could have been a whole hour podcast. So I'm not going to get too much more into that, because we could talk about robots and it could get deep, but that's where I'm going to stand with that. Okay, next question. This one's an easy one to answer, so this one will be pretty short. Baron FRFX asks me, do you like any obscure types of music? So to be completely honest, not really. No, I think the music I like is pretty standard, straightforward music. I like a lot of different music. I like classical. I like jazz. I like blues. I like R&B. I like ragtime piano. I like rap. I like hip hop. I like a lot of different music. As far as obscure goes, in classical piano, I do like Igor Stravinsky. He is considered to be possibly obscure, maybe not though, but possibly abstract. So maybe Igor Stravinsky, The Rite of Spring, I really like, might be considered obscure. I used to like a band called Animal Collective, who are kind of strange and bizarre. In my opinion, they're not really all that obscure, but maybe to the average listener, they might be. So Animal Collective. My favorite band was called the World Inferno Friendship Society. And again, I don't think they're obscure at all, but I do remember when I was younger, people were like, what is this? Like circus punk? Like, what is this? They had this, specific style that was unique. But again, to me, that's not obscure. Like, it was just a unique style of music that they had created. I will say this, the only thing that I truly believe to be obscure, they're not even my favorite band, or like they're not even a huge influence on me. My father really likes them, so I kind of like them just because my father likes them. This is truly an obscure band. They are called The Residents. They are such a weird band. You should Google this later if you want, like listen to some of their songs and look at their pictures. They're a band who they don't show their actual faces. They only wear these eyeball masks with top hats. Like, so every one of the band members wears like an eyeball with a top hat, and their music is totally out there. There are a few songs from that band that I actually do like to listen to, but that's only a result of my father being obsessed with the band. So really my father likes obscure music, and I just kind of like tagged along because I was so I was influenced by him. So really that's the only thing that I could truly think of is The Residents are truly obscure. And then again, maybe Animal Collective, maybe the World Inferno Friendship Society, and maybe Igor Stravinsky. But I don't even think those are as a musician, I don't think those are obscure at all. I think the only one on that list that is truly obscure would be The Residents. But that's it. That's interesting that you would ask that. I wonder, like, if you listen to some obscure music yourself, and that's why you're asking. Okay, I have one more question on this list. This is a good question. The question is from K Madan 462. He was also on my podcast. We had a great conversation. He asks me, do you know of the mirror principle? And if so, can you talk a bit about that to help others? I'm going to repeat the question. Do you know of the mirror principle? I feel like I pronounced that wrong. So MIRROR, mirror. Do you know of the mirror principle? If so, can you talk a bit about that to help others? So when I first read your question, I didn't know what you were talking about. So I Googled it, and then I did know. So to explain to everybody what the mirror principle is, it is a spiritual theory, like a new age spiritual theory, that believes that whatever is happening in your internal world is to be reflected in your external world. To me, that was a similar theory than the law of attraction, which I think is essentially saying the same thing. So it might be a similar way to say the law of attraction. What I will say about these types of theories is that I do believe them to an extent. So I'll start by saying I do believe that in the human experience, there is something incredibly creatively powerful about being a human, and something going on that is way more than meets the eye as far as spirituality. And I do not like to get into like cringy white girl yoga type of stuff. So when I say this, I really mean it and I really believe it. Based on my life experiences, I do truly believe there is something more to being human that meets the eye that we will never be able to explain through science. Well, I shouldn't say never. Maybe eventually we could explain it through science. But back to what I was saying, I do think there is some sort of telepathic connection between humans. I've definitely had experiences in my life where I've been thinking about somebody a lot and then they call me the next day. I've heard stories within my own family, actually, like to give an example, when my grandpa died, both my father and my aunt said that they knew it instantly when he was dying. They both knew he was dying. They both knew he was on, what is that? The name just slipped my mind. Hospice. Everybody in the family knew he was on hospice, but both my father and my aunt both claimed that in the middle of the night, like I don't know if it was 1 a.m, midnight, something like that, they sprung out of bed. This was my father's story specifically. My father sprung out of bed and it was like, my dad died. He just knew it, felt it intuitively. And something with my aunt, she was like driving home from somewhere and she was like, he's dying now. Like she knew it intuitively. So I believe those stories. I don't think they're lying. So there's stuff like that. I've had things like that. So again, I really, truly do believe there is some truth, there is some validity to things like the mirror theory and the law of attraction. I do think human beings have incredible creative powers that they may never be able to truly understand. With that being said, I do think it's important not to rely solely on this and to accept the fact that some things could happen out of your control. So, and I'm going to get back more to the mirror theory in a second, but I want to make this clear before I explain the mirror theory, because I think it's important to know. For example, there are genuine catastrophes that could happen. For example, if a child gets cancer at 7 years old, an innocent, sweet child that really hasn't done any harm to anybody besides the normal like life lessons of a 7-year-old child. If a child like that gets cancer, I think it's important not to recognize that, oh, his internal world was negative, therefore he got sick. No, that's crazy. That's crazy talk. I do think there are external forces that do not come within yourself that are totally out of your control. However, I do think we have a degree of control in this game of life, whatever you want to call it. And again, I've personally experienced that in both negative and positive times in my life. So for example, there had been times in my life where I had been resentful and bitter towards people who had hurt me. And I remember there was this one specific friend who I felt hurt by her in a pretty significant way. I feel she had broken my trust in a few very significant ways. And I felt I'm very sensitive to betrayal. I'm incredibly sensitive to betrayal. And I think that's related to some childhood trauma type stuff. So I think when I feel betrayed by a friend or a family or a relationship, I go into like full fight or flight, and I have trouble forgetting it. And it could take me sometimes years to recover from betrayal. Anyways, there had been one friend specifically that I was really hurt by the way I had believed that she had betrayed me. And I couldn't stop thinking about her, and I couldn't stop thinking about it, and I couldn't stop replaying the negative memories in my head. And I remember like intuitively knowing and feeling, and I'm like, if I keep thinking about her, she's going to show up. Like, I know it. And I knew that. And then I remember, I think it was like the next day, like the day before, I intuitively knew I would eventually run into her if I kept thinking about her. And then I did run into her. So it's just like, again, stuff like that. It's like that's where the law of attraction and the mirror theory to me do come into play. I do think we have our human brains do have the capacity to shape and mold the world around us. Same thing with positive things. I do think if you work towards something and you pray for something and you shape your internal dialogue about achieving a goal, you will manifest a reality in which you will achieve that goal or come closer to achieving that goal. And again, the word manifest is even cringy to me because again, we live in this like new age white girl crystal society where people overuse these words and make them gross. But I do think there is a reality to manifestation. And I do think that if human beings do focus on the positive, they could see genuine manifestations of what's in their head, you know? With that being said, I do again, that's why I spoke about it before. It is important to recognize that I do believe there are external forces that can overpower these human creative forces out of your control. And I think it's important to remember that. It's important to know that you could manifest the life of your dreams and it could be ripped away from you instantly, beyond your control. You know what I mean? There could be a war, there could be a major accident, a murder, like a sickness, a death. Like there's so many things that could happen. And it's important to, in the process of recognizing your power, to also recognize that you're truly mortal. I said that one, right? Mortal's the one where you could die, right? Immortal is the one where you can't die. I think it's incredibly important to just always remember that no matter how much power you have and capacity and capability as a human being, stay fucking humble, because you're very mortal. You bleed just like everybody else. You get sick just like everybody else. So I really believe in having a healthy balance of these two worlds, using your creative powers the best, but then also accepting with radically accepting the fact that it could all be taken away and it could all become chaotic at any second. But yeah, no, that's my belief on the mirror theory and the law of attraction. I think there's some truth to it. You just have to use it wisely and understand that it's not everything either. But anyways, that's actually it. Sorry if that was like a negative note to end on. I don't have anything like positive to say after that. Well, I mean, I guess that was relatively a positive message. That's it. That is the Pranzata Podcast, episode number 104. Again, if you enjoyed what you heard today, please help me on my mission to get this channel monetized so I can create better and better content for you guys. Please comment on anything we talked about in the comment section. Also, I do occasionally do solo podcasts when I having a busy week or I don't have a guest booked. So please, in the comment section, put your questions for me if you want me to talk about a specific subject. I would love to do another Q&A and talk more about this with you guys. So any future ideas that you have, please put in the comment section below, and I would gladly take those and write them in a journal and pick my favorites and use them for the next solo episode. But that's it, guys. Pranzata Podcast, episode 104. Have a good day. Bye.